why is this child suffering from inflammation and this child isn't? And I use this really strong analogy to sort of explain it.
Okay.
We're all sort of born with this metaphorical trash can in our body.
There are a lot of moms out there, high achieving moms, that feel like they've tried everything. It's therapy, medication, discipline, routines, and supplements. Maybe even try to change a little bit of the diet. But how can parents tell the difference between this approach isn't working, this approach is not solving the problem? Today, we're taking a deeper look at ADHD, not just through the lens of behavior, focus, or discipline, but through the lens of biology. So often, when a child is struggling with impulsivity, emotional outbursts, and distractibility, defiance, or just difficulty sitting still, the conversation quickly turns to how do we manage the behavior? And parents are handed strategies, schedules, consequences, accommodations, and sometimes medication. And while all of these things have a place, many parents are still left wondering, why is my child struggling so much in the first place? So my guest today, Dana Kay, invites us to ask a different question. Instead of simply asking, how do we stop the symptoms, she helps parents explore what might be driving the symptoms underneath the surface. So Dana's work focuses on the biological factors that are often overlooked in ADHD. Things like inflammation, gut health, nutrition, food sensitivities, toxins, sleep, and the way a child's body may be under stress long before that stress shows up in their behavior. Now, this isn't a conversation about blaming parents one way or the other or fixing children. It's a conversation about understanding our children more deeply, becoming curious instead of discouraged, and recognizing that behavior may be communication from the body. So if you're a parent who has tried all the things, I can relate, but it still feels like something is missing, I believe this conversation will give you a fresh lens, a sense of hope, and some practical places to begin. So with that, Dana Kay, welcome to the Parenting 411 podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited for this conversation today.
Yes. Well, how did you wade into this area? Because everybody knows that ADHD is a hot button issue.
It definitely is. Believe it or not, I wasn't always a health and ADHD expert. I used to work with numbers.
Mm.
I was an accountant, but something happened that changed everything. My son started at the age of 4 or a little bit earlier having big meltdowns. His energy was way higher than other kids. He couldn't sit still. A lot of the things that you shared in your introduction, it was hard for him to focus, and it made me feel like something wasn't right. And the doctors told us he had ADHD. He was diagnosed at the age of 4 and gave him medication. And at first, I was relieved with the diagnosis. It wasn't my fault. I wasn't a bad mum. And yay, we were finally getting help. But after a while, the medication didn't seem to help as much. It even started making things worse. The doctor kept giving us more medication, but nothing was really working. And he was on 3 medications at the age of 5, and the doctor wanted to give him a fourth. And that's when I knew something wasn't right. And I dove into the research and the science. I ended up going back to my holistic science degree and multiple certifications in this area, and really started learning that, ADHD symptoms are the signal,
Right.
and that there's something else going on inside the body, and as you shared, there's biology beneath that behavior. And I dove into all of that, and Today, my son, he's actually 15. He hasn't been on meds for years and he's thriving. And I've been lucky enough to help over 1,600 other families do the same for their child. Medication isn't the only way. At the same time, this is not about blaming anyone. I'm not totally
Right.
against medication, but there are other things that can help.
Well, I'm glad we're talking about this. I mean, I have definitely personal experience with ADHD. I have twin sons, and both were diagnosed at different times in their when they were younger. And yes, I mean, we dove into a lot of that, the nutrition and all of those other things. We also did ultimately elect to go with medication because they were approaching kindergarten, and that was really a critical time where we wanted to make sure that they were tuned in to building their foundation in their academic
Hmm.
pursuits. So. But as you said, and I am very eager to hear more about what you say about that not necessarily being a permanent thing. Like you said
Hmm.
with your son, my sons did use medication throughout their K through 12 experience, and it was very beneficial for them. And then I can't remember whether I shared with you, but I was diagnosed with
Yes, you
ADHD
did.
about 2 years ago,
Yes.
and so I am actually not uh, using medication because it didn't really help me. That just didn't really make a difference. So I actually, it's more diet and just a different type of more natural
Hmm.
supplement that I use that seems to be helpful. But we'll see. I'll see after talking to you.
Yeah.
That's a good thing. But the thing is, many parents are told that ADHD is all about focus, impulse control, and behavior. And very often that's what they're focused on because they know that's what schools want them to take care of. We need
Hmm.
this child to behave so we can keep order in the classrooms. And so, as you said, the symptoms may really be signals from the body. So,
Yeah.
what do you believe that ADHD symptoms are really trying to communicate? Like, what's happening beneath the surface?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I think the biggest shift in perspective that, for myself and what I try to teach other parents, is that ADHD symptoms are the signal because, most people, as you said, are taught to look at the behavior sort of in isolation, that hyperactivity, the emotional ups and downs, the inability to focus. And the assumption is often, this is just ADHD. This is just who the child is. This is purely a brain disorder. But when I look at those symptoms, I see things so differently. I see them as signals that the body may be under stress. Now that stress can come from many different places, like you mentioned in the introduction. It can come from gut dysfunction. It can come
Mhm.
from food sensitivities, poor detox, blood sugar instability, nutrition going into the body, stuff like that. And what's fascinating is that many of these stresses create very similar behavioral symptoms. So a child that may look ADHD externally, internally their body is struggling. If a child has chronic inflammation, that inflammation affects the
Mhm.
brain then can't focus. If the gut is inflamed, neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine, the production of them can be affected. If nutrient levels are depleted, the brain can't function optimally. If toxins are building up faster than the body can clear them out, the nervous system becomes stressed, and children often can't articulate that something feels off internally. So the
Mhm.
body speaks through behavior, it speaks through symptoms. And that's why I always say that behavior and symptoms is the signal, is the communication. And I think it's such an empowering perspective
Mhm.
for families or parents because it moves away from that blame. And so instead of saying my child is difficult or this is just ADHD or my child is choosing this, We
Right.
start asking what is stressing the child's system, and that question changes everything, because now we stop fighting the child or fighting the symptoms and start becoming detectives, trying
Hmm.
to understand what the body may be struggling with underneath the surface.
Right. And it seems like the body is just trying to respond, and all of the energy and attention that it's using to respond to what's going on in the gut and all of these other places is energy that can't be used by the brain, it seems.
Exactly, exactly. So, if we think about when we're sick, we've got
Hmm.
brain fog, we are tired, but for children, they are sick internally. Their brain can't focus, and they just can't communicate it in the way that we can as adults.
Right. And so if parents, instead of looking at behavior and just focusing on how can we stop this behavior, instead asked, well, let me find out what biological stressors might be driving this behavior, where would they start?
Yeah, look, I think that's a great question, and the one thing that I will say is everyone's different. Every child is different. I think that the number one thing driving or exacerbating ADHD symptoms in kids today is inflammation. And so it's really important to start reducing this inflammation from the start. It has become Inflammation has become so prevalent over the years. It's linked to a number of diseases, but it's essential in the body. Look, it's essential for wound healing. It's essential for when we're sick. But chronic inflammation is different. It can wreak havoc on the whole body, on the brain,
So when
and
you're
so
talking about, excuse me one second, when you're talking about inflammation, for the audience, I want to give them a sense of inflammation. Where is it concentrated in a certain place, or is it different parts of the show? Talk to them about that.
yeah, look, I mean, inflammation anywhere.
Okay.
I will talk about the gut-brain connection in a second, but if we look at the bigger picture, inflammation is a biological response in the body. It's triggered by the immune system, and so when we have irritants or pathogens damaging as our cells, the immune system sends signals, sends these inflammatory responses, infections, wounds, damage to the tissue.
Hmm.
We're not able to heal without an inflammatory response. So not all inflammation is bad. Good inflammation is good, but
Hmm.
long-term inflammation, it sort of lasts for prolonged periods, for
Hmm.
several months and or years, and that's called chronic inflammation. And it eventually causes a lot of the disease and the conditions that a lot of people are experiences.
Hmm.
Now, inflammation can affect one area, but it can affect the whole body. It can affect the brain. The World Health Organization ranks inflammation as the greatest threat to human health.
Hmm.
And inflammation has been researched so much, it shows up in so many different signs and symptoms. It can show up as depression, anxiety, or mood disorders. It can show up as constant fatigue and insomnia. It can show up as gastrointestinal complications like constipation, diarrhea. It can show up as body pain, weight gain, frequent infections. And so, if you think about all of those symptoms, there are so many diseases linked with those symptoms: ADHD, asthma,
Hmm.
autism, heart
Hmm.
disease. All of these things, they are as a result of chronic inflammation. So
Okay.
if we look at that and go, okay, well, our kids are suffering from inflammation. How do we, why are they showing up? Why is this child suffering from inflammation and this child isn't? And I use this really strong analogy to sort of explain it.
Okay.
We're all sort of born with this metaphorical trash can in our body. And so if you're watching, I'm holding up a little trash can. If you're listening, I'm
Hmm.
holding up a trash can. And, throughout life, things are thrown in that trash can:
Hmm.
poor diet, stress,
Hmm.
bacteria, medications, environmental toxins, heavy metals, all those things that we talk about. And all of that adds to the load. Now, normally, the body is supposed to empty that trash can regularly through our detoxification pathways, just like we put the trash can out on the side of the road on a Monday for the garbage truck to pick it up. So
Hmm.
imagine, okay, we put it out there, the garbage truck takes it away. That's what healthy detoxification looks like. The
Hmm.
liver processes toxins, the gut removes the waste, the kidneys filter it, the body
Hmm.
clears things out. But
Hmm.
what I've found in so many kids with ADHD is that their bodies are not emptying the trash can effectively.
Okay.
Okay. There are many reasons for that. It could either be genetics, it could either be gut dysfunction,
Hmm.
high toxic exposure, those sort of things. So the trash starts piling up faster than the body can clear it. And eventually it overflows. And
Hmm.
that overflows creates that inflammation. And that inflammation and that stress goes throughout the body and to the brain and to the gut. And that inflammation shows up as hyperactivity, poor focus,
Hmm.
mood swings, all of these things. I'm not saying that ADHD is caused by inflammation or caused by toxin or one single thing,
Right.
but the analogy is about the cumulative load,
Hmm.
because every child's trash can is different.
Right.
One may be more affected by food, one may be more affected by mold.
Hmm.
But the more overloaded the system becomes, the harder it is for the brain
Hmm.
and the nervous system to function well. And so that's why some kids fall apart under stress more easily than others. Their trash
Hmm.
can is already close to overflowing.
Hmm.
So for us, it's really about reduce the load that's going in and
Hmm.
improve the body's ability to take that trash out. Does that make
Right.
sense?
Oh, absolutely. And I'm sure we're going to get into it later, but when you think about the prevalence of
Mm-hmm.
ADHD, then you have to start to look at what do all of these children have in common, and it's likely to show up in our food supply and our
Yes.
environment. I mean, there are
Yep.
probably some other things we could throw in the mix, but those are
Mm-hmm.
so fundamental,
Yep.
just starting from when they're young.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope we'll talk a bit about that. But I do want to, if you don't mind, hear like what you discovered when you took a look beneath the surface with your own son and what surprised you and what do
Yeah.
you wish that you had learned earlier?
Yeah, look, I mean, I have to say that the gut brain connection for me was one of the biggest sort of aha moments.
Hmm.
And our gut and our brain are so deeply connected. They're in constant communication with each other.
Hmm.
And I think that, as you said, that we've got to look at what's going on in the environment, what's going on in our food supply that's causing this uptick of kids that are suffering so much. I want to add to that, and it really ties in with this gut brain connection, is that you know we've got so many kids that are suffering. Interestingly, there was a study done that estimated that 54% of American children were diagnosed with a chronic illness, and that was in 2018. But that figure
Oh.
before that was only 15% a couple of years before that. And
Hmm.
so it was really shocking to look at that increase. So, where is that coming from? Um, 80% of the body's entire immune system is within the gut wall, along with billions of nerve cells and extensive amount of beneficial gut bacteria. So all of our children's health is quite literally connected to everything that goes on in the gut. And I speak to countless families. They come to me for guidance with their child's ADHD symptoms. And when I ask whether there's a family history of sickness, or people usually tell me everyone's fit, everyone's healthy, they're not sick that often. But when I sort of press forward, I ask whether their child has been on antibiotics.
Hmm.
And I wish I had actually kept a tally of how many kids had actually been on antibiotics in the past, out of all the families that I spoke to. It's a large percentage, but with antibiotics, they can be life saving, but how they work is they kill bacteria or prevent it from growing.
Hmm.
But most antibiotics can't distinguish between good bacteria and bad bacteria. And that means they can wreak havoc on the gut's healthy bacteria. And
Hmm.
many people actually suffer lasting changes in their gut flora as a result of taking antibiotics. So we've got this large percentage of children being on multiple rounds of antibiotics, and that's in turn compromising the gut. And so we've got this huge increase in disorders from medications, antibiotics, as you said, toxins in the environment, food supplies. Now, I want to
Hmm.
tie gut health to brain health. And what that means is that our brains are connected deeply to our guts. And if our guts aren't functioning well, our brain won't be able to function well either. 95% of serotonin and
Hmm.
50% of the body's dopamine is produced in the gut. These are our happy, feel good hormone neurotransmitters that help us manage emotions. They balance our mood. They help our cognitive function. And emotional dysregulation is a common symptom of ADHD. But many parents don't realize that this emotional dysregulation
Hmm.
actually starts in the gut where the serotonin and the dopamine are made. So it's not the emotions themselves that we need to put a band-aid on or manage. It's the
Right.
fact that the correct amount of these vital neurotransmitters are not being made in the first place. So, firstly, by working on gut health,
Hmm.
many parents of children with ADHD find that emotional dysregulation problems solve themselves.
Hmm.
Now, I want to layer into that.
Hey, Mama, I get it. I remember those early days of motherhood, feeling totally outnumbered and out of my depth with my twin boys. Mother's Work, Pearls of Wisdom and Gems for My Journey is the book I wish I'd had back then. In my mini motherhood memoir, I share the real, unfiltered moments, from overwhelm to breakthroughs. Along the way, I discovered 7 guideposts that helped me find my footing, and I think they'll do the same for you. And guess what? I'm giving the book away free. Just head to mothersworkthebook.com to grab yours. Just pay shipping and handling, and also get your hands on some wonderful bonuses. You don't have to do this alone. Let's walk this journey together. That's mothersworkthebook.com. Can't wait for you to read it.
The brain has many areas involved in gut function, the chief of
Hmm.
which is the frontal lobe. It's that area in the middle of the forehead.
Hmm.
That talks to the gut via that two-way chemical messengers and nerve branches. The
Hmm.
frontal lobe is involved in attention and focus and executive function and planning and organizing and
Hmm.
problem solving. Do any of those sound like ones that are affected by ADHD?
Oh, absolutely. And as I'm listening to you speak, I'm thinking about how today, and I would even say even 20 years ago, it was starting to really be a case where this knowledge was really coming into the mainstream.
Yep.
And because I use 20 years as a marker because my sons are young adults now. And
Yes.
so where the average person could kind of gather this information. Whereas
Yep.
before, I'm sure all of this was known, but it was really within the domain of professionals.
Mm-hmm.
And if your child didn't have that particular problem, you didn't know about it. And chances are your neighbor's children didn't have this either. It was just really rare and really
Yep.
concentrated with people whose children had extreme, and here we go, behavior, because that's
Mm-hmm.
all anybody's looking at, have behavior challenges. They might have been clued into this, but it's great that we as a people are making that mind body connection, that brain gut connection, or if they're not making it, the information is readily available, so you can you can get it.
Yeah, look, I mean, back in the day when my son was really struggling, it was never a discuss. It's not a discussion when a child's diagnosed. It still isn't. But with there's so much more access to information out there. There's a lot of people, like myself, who are out there saying like, this needs to be part of the conversation. I think the gut brain connection is super important. I like to use this little analogy. Have you ever sort of felt butterflies in your stomach
Hmm.
because you were nervous about something?
Yeah.
First date, a test, a conflict, whatever it may be. That's a perfect example of the gut brain connection. Our
Hmm.
bodies perceive whatever we're nervous about as a stressful
Yes.
situation, and then
Hmm.
our brains trigger that raw emotion in the gut. That
Hmm.
results in that feelings of butterflies or nausea. That's the brain talking to the gut. But
Right.
the reverse is also true. So our guts talk to our brains as well. And when that gut is broken down, when it's inflamed, when there's a higher level of bad bacteria than good, that's called gut dysbiosis, that creates inflammation that travels up the body through the vagus nerve and
Hmm.
straight to the frontal lobe, where it creates those symptoms like inability to focus or poor
Hmm.
memory. And so, it's like this highway. The gut and the brain are constantly talking to each other. And so I find one thing fascinating. Sorry, I get a little bit geeky about this sometimes, but
Oh, no, no, I get it. And also we had some allergies, so that's why we learned about that pretty early on, because we also had food allergies, and
Mhm.
I had allergies that I then wanted to have them tested for, just to,
Yes.
and especially because they were so young. And I wanted to know this because in case they could not communicate exactly what they were experiencing, I wanted to know if there were any allergies early on. So they ultimately didn't have them, but just going through that process and learning, even if they didn't have allergies to foods that they outright shouldn't eat, like I have a couple that I just should not eat at all,
Yeah.
there were sensitivities. So
Yes.
I learned about that. And
And the thing
so,
with
mhm,
yeah, food sensitivities create inflammation.
yeah.
And when you've got a broken down gut, it forms these holes in the lining of the gut. And when you eat food, that food doesn't have a chance to break down in the gut and digest properly before it goes through those holes in the lining of the gut into the bloodstream. Now, the
Hmm.
body, the way it's designed, is foreign objects are not meant to be in the bloodstream. So, what the body does, it turns on an inflammatory response. It tries to kill them off. And what happens as a result of that, it further results in more holes in the lining of the gut. So, leaky gut, as we call it, or intestinal
Hmm.
permeability, creates these food sensitivities. And then, if you continue to eat those food sensitivities, that inflammation as a result of them further breaks down in the lining of the gut. So, it's like this vicious
I
cycle.
was
So,
going to say.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
So, there are a lot of moms out there, high achieving moms, uh, that feel like they've tried everything. It's therapy,
Mhm.
medication, discipline, routines, and supplements. Maybe even try to change a little bit of the diet. But how can parents tell the difference between this approach isn't working, this approach is not solving the problem, and maybe we're missing the root cause? We haven't hit it yet.
Yeah, look, I think that, the conversation should be, it's fascinating. ADHD is meant to be a diagnosis of exclusion. And what that means is doctors are meant to exclude every other possibility before they actually diagnose ADHD, which
Hmm.
never happens. And so, I think that the conversation needs to be was let's check the body out first. If we then, I like to use functional lab testing with the families that I work with. Functional lab testing is kind of like, a little glass into what's going on in the body to determine what's needed. Is there a
Hmm.
breakdown in the gut? Are you allergic to something like what you mentioned that can cause uh, inflammation? And
Hmm.
so, like, when you have a cough, a doctor looks inside your throat and listens to your
Hmm.
chest, finds out what's causing it. Well, for
Hmm.
ADHD, we can do special tests to
Hmm.
find out what's going on in the body that might make each kid feel bad or not be able to focus.
Hmm.
And they're like little detective tools for the body. So it really helps us see what's going on. Then we can target that and the
Hmm.
body can start feeling better. So I feel like that should be the first port of call.
Hmm. Hmm.
Why isn't the body functioning well?
Hmm.
Fix that, whether it's through diet, supplementation, lifestyle adjustments, helping optimize detox pathways, and then assess if the child has something like ADHD, if those symptoms are still persistent.
Right.
My son, as I mentioned, first port of call was diagnosed, got given medication. We had to add more medication, new medications, three
Right.
medications he was on. The doctor wanted him on a fourth. And then I did functional lab testing and I looked inside his body and I saw that he had a parasite. He had bacterial overgrowth. We targeted that. He had food sensitivities. We temporarily removed those foods. And then he
Hmm.
had some nutritional deficiencies, so we supplemented with to help those nutritional deficiencies.
Hmm.
Literally within a couple of weeks of taking out the foods that he was sensitive to,
Hmm.
his body started to calm. His
Hmm.
meltdowns and his tantrums became fewer and further between. It was like his body could all of a sudden function how it was meant to. Now,
Hmm.
I always ask him now, and we've never taken him back for another reassessment of
Hmm.
ADHD, but I say to him now, do you think you've got ADHD? And he's like, no. Um, I would actually like to take him back for that, but we paid $5,000 with a neuropsych eval to get him
Hmm.
diagnosed over multiple sittings. We did it the right way, for a
Right.
full analysis.
Hmm.
And even after the first 20 minutes, the neuropsych said, "No doubt in my mind, he's got ADHD. We're still going to go through all the tests, but no doubt in my mind." Yes,
Hmm.
it came out with ADHD, but we were able to get his body functioning the way that it was meant to. So his brain could focus, so his
Hmm.
body could be calm, so his emotions could be stable. Now, I will say, no one's perfect. He's a 16-year-old boy. I've got a 12-year-old son as well. They're crazy boys. They're
Hmm.
loud, they're obnoxious, but they're happy.
Right.
He's happy. He's thriving at school. He's thriving in his friendship group. And so that should be the first conversation, not here's ADHD, here's a medication. And so if you
Hmm.
can then go, okay, look, we've done all that. We've excluded, the gut's functioning well, there's no inflammation, there's no food sensitivities. Then let's talk about medication. Then let's talk about the support that we can give the body so that they can thrive.
Hmm. And, to make sure that parents are kind of taking it seriously up once their child has the diagnosis and not focusing just on the medication that could initially mask what's going on
Yeah.
because there could be a temporary improvement. But thinking about what's going on when a child's body is under stress, how might that shape the way they experience everyday occurrences, the schoolwork, transitions in the
Yeah.
day, their emotions, and how about even correction from their parents, how they receive that? What might that be like if the child is under stress and it's not, their body's under stress and it hasn't been addressed?
Yeah, look, I mean, at 6 or 7, it might show up as meltdowns and tantrums. At 9 or 10, it starts to, really impact the way they see themselves. It can then start to have this silent impact on their learning and their growth. And then, in their teens, that shapes the way that they're going to be throughout life. And so
Hmm.
the sooner that we can actually have a look and have these conversations, the better, because I heard once that kids with ADHD receive 20,000 more negative messages in their childhood than their neurotypical peers. And so if you think about that, that child is constantly hearing those negative messages.
Hmm.
How can that shape how they see themselves,
Hmm.
shape their life and their future of their internal self worth?
Hmm. Hmm.
So if we really look at that, anything that we can do to help them thrive and reduce those symptoms from the source is just going to be a positive experience for them and for their life and their families. I remember when we were really suffering with my son's symptoms, our family was we were walked around on eggshells. We were
Hmm.
on this emotional roller coaster up and down. Every moment was anticipating what was going to happen next with him.
Hmm.
When was he going to melt down? And so that put immense pressure and stress on our whole entire family unit.
Hmm.
My nervous system was shot as a result of it. I couldn't parent properly as a result of it. And
Hmm.
I actually had to retrain my nervous system once we could step out of that or step off that emotional roller coaster. And so
Hmm. Hmm.
if I think about what that did to me, what does that do to a child who doesn't understand?
Right. Right. That's a very good point. Very good point. As we're kind of coming to the close, what would you say to a mom listening who is wondering, am I failing my child because I nothing's worked yet? I haven't found that right combination of uh, remedies, for lack of a better word, um, to help my child thrive. What would you say?
Yeah, I would just say it's not your fault
Hmm.
at
Hmm.
all. Um, we know what information we know, and we don't know what we don't know. And
Hmm.
so that's why I try to get out there as much as possible and shout it from the rooftops that, if you have a child with ADHD, it doesn't mean that they need to suffer. It doesn't mean that your family needs to suffer, that there are things out there that can help them.
Hmm.
And, but I will also say that Rome wasn't built in a day.
Right.
You don't need to make all of these changes overnight.
Hmm.
Small and slow steps keep you moving forward, and so when a lot of people hear this information for the first time, they're like, "Oh my God, I'm so overwhelmed! I need to go do this. I need to go do this. I need to go do this." No, you don't.
Hmm.
Now, just knowing this can change your perception
Hmm.
of what's going on, and now you know this information, you can start to take some small slow steps towards it. So I just want families out there to know that there's hope, and just because you've got a diagnosis of ADHD doesn't mean that you or your child need to suffer.
Right. Right. Well, thank you for that. And so, how can we follow you, your work, and how can parents connect with you?
So my website is ADHDthriveinstitute.com. I'm on all social media platforms at ADHD Thrive Institute, YouTube, Instagram. I also have a podcast that's called the Soaring Child Podcast, so you can check that out as well.
Oh, okay. That's wonderful. I'll have to definitely check that out. And so I would say that what I appreciate most about the conversation that we've had today is just really that reminder to look beneath the surface, look beneath the behavior to really see what's going on with your child because so often we just focus on what we see, the meltdowns you talked about, the impulsivity, the lack of focus, and the resistance because we love our kids, but we just need them to do what we say when we say, and it just makes for peace and easy living all around. And we may get that through some short-term fixes, but internally, it's not easy living for our children. And so, as you reminded us, behavior is not always the whole story. And sometimes what looks like defiance is really dysregulation, which you talked about. So, what could be laziness could actually be overwhelm. And what looks like not listening might be a child whose brain and body just need more support. And so I appreciate you sharing what else could possibly be going on and what parents could dig deeper and take a look at. And so my encouragement to all the parents today is to just stay curious about your child. Trust your instincts and ask deeper questions. Your child is not a problem that needs to be fixed. They are a whole person that just needs to be understood and supported. And I always tell parents that your children long to be known and understood, and this is part of it, and knowing them from the inside out. And so I want to thank everyone for joining us today for this episode of the Parenting 411 podcast, and follow us at the Parenting 411 on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube so you don't miss a single episode. And until next time, remember that parenting is not about perfection, it's about connection, growth, and showing up with intention. I can't wait to talk to you again next time.
We bring you this episode for the purpose of information and entertainment only. It is not the intent or purpose of the Parenting 411 podcast or Carol Maletta to provide an exhaustive reference or guide on all aspects of parenting, childcare, and family life. You are strongly encouraged to read all available information, consult medical or other appropriate professionals, and pursue all reasonable means to learn as much as possible about parenting to complement what you gain here, and then tailor the information to meet your individual needs. Yes, parenting is a serious matter, though it is not an exact science. The context and insights offered in this and every episode represent an account of knowledge and personal experiences of the host and any featured guests for the viewers' and listeners' information and consideration. The host and guests do not guarantee to our viewers or listeners any specific parenting outcomes from this episode or taking actions described here.